Family business makes no sense. So let's talk about it.
Welcome to another episode of Family Business Makes No Sense, where we explore the fundamental concept that family and business are such fundamentally different concepts with such oppositional success factors. If you are daft or game enough to mix your family with your business, you are inevitably going to have some conflict further down the line, or maybe a lot of it. So today we're going to be talking about mindsets. This is cause number 10 in a lengthy series. And in particular, we're going to explore why it is that mindsets can be one of the elements that come into many of the common causes of conflict, and most importantly, what can you do about mindsets to help resolve or avoid those conflicts. I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. I've been working with families in business for a great many years, mainly helping them to resolve their conflicts arising through things like succession processes. And one of the things that I learned very early on is that the vast majority of family conflicts are not about money, although they often present as though they're about money. They're usually much more likely to do with damaged relationships and a lack of sense of fairness within the family group, very much personal stuff rather than financial or commercial. Consequently, if we're going to deal with the conflict, it's best to treat it as a problem that requires empathic problem solving, because it will almost invariably respond much better to that approach than it will to legal threats, logical arguments, or emotional blackmail. So today we're going to be talking about why and how mindsets play into family conflicts within family business. And with a better understanding of how and why, we are much better placed to then deal with those causes of conflict to resolve conflict or prevent it happening in the first place. If this is interesting to you, please settle in and buckle up. Now, the first thing I'm going to do when we commence our exploration into mindsets is dive into a quote from Professor Carol Dweck, who is Professor of Psychology at Stanford University and who wrote the book Mindsets in 2006, which has been, depending on which edition you get, updated in 2016 or 2019. Dweck said, and I'm reading, "A mindset is an individual's private compilation of attitudes, beliefs, and ways of thinking. It shapes their perceptions, feelings, behaviours, responses to people and things, and their approach to life in general. They also influence the way we perceive and react to challenges, approach opportunities, handle problems and setbacks, achieve personal growth, and build or damage relationships through the ways we interact with others." What do we draw from that? Because it's a very big, all-encompassing statement. Well, Dweck's focus as a psychologist is on personal improvement. And as we'll see, she essentially says you either have a growth or a fixed mindset, and a growth mindset is one that is prepared to believe and wants to believe that nothing is finite, everything can be improved, everything can be grown, everything can be made better. You just need to be doing the right things to make all of those things happen, and you will get good outcomes. The fixed mindset, and bear in mind, we're going to subdivide these things substantially for our purposes, but the fixed mindset is really the opposite of that, and it says everything is done and dusted. Nothing is going to get any better than it is really now. We just need to work with what we've got and do what we can. So neither is inherently evil or right or wrong. It's simply the growth mindset is very receptive to opportunity and therefore very encouraging of trying to find better ways of doing things, where the fixed mindset tends to be very much more inward looking and saying, well, this is about as good as it's going to get. I'm about as good as I'm ever going to be, so not much point making the effort. We're stuck here. Let's dive a bit deeper into this concept, because we've basically taken some pretty clear ideas intended for one purpose, and we've sort of repurposed them into the area of family business conflict for our own uses, because we find an understanding of mindsets has been really helpful to us in terms of pulling families to pieces to understand what they're all about, and then putting them back together again in much more positive ways afterwards. So to do this, we need to break apart the idea of growth and fixed mindset and zero in on some of the mindsets we think we see in a family business space. And what we're doing in essence is saying we have a problem that we're trying to fix, and we're looking for tools to help us fix those problems. So let me stress right now that if things are going reasonably well within a family business environment, you don't need to go around putting labels on people to form views or opinions about who or what they are, what they should be doing, and what's right or wrong about them. You're better off sort of going with the flow and interacting with what you're seeing in front of you. If, however, and this is a bit like, you don't go to the doctor unless you're sick, if, however, you think that there is a problem, there is a conflict, or it's very obvious that there's a conflict there, then you may find that trying to use mindsets as a form of labeling of what headspace are these people in and what is making them do this, over and above what we know about their character and personality, the labeling process in itself, like most management theories, says once you've labeled it and named it, then you draw some parameters around it which enable you to focus in on what you need to do to make things better. And it's the very opposite of saying, well, I don't know, I can't deal with this, I don't understand, because when you say that, you're not going to do anything positive about dealing with the situation you're faced with. And we need to deal with the problems because we're trying to resolve the conflict. So let's just dive into this and give you some ideas which may stimulate some useful thinking and give you some tools that you can use. Let's start with a couple of broader categories then. Let's move away from fixed and growth, and let's look at some specific things that we see on a pretty common basis in family business. We see people who've got adversarial mindsets who just always seem to be looking for a fight. We see people who are fundamentally oppositional. So they're not looking for a fight, but they're looking to disagree with anything that anybody else says, frequently for reasons that are hard to understand. In the family business space, one of the afflictions that we see all the time is sense of entitlement. And whilst millennials are often blamed for having massive sense of entitlement, if we look at some of the reasons why people feel entitled, and I've got to say they didn't start with millennials, it's been around for a while, we can usually track it back to an awful lot of expectations that were created during childhood, which then play out in the adult arena as entitlement. It wasn't there when the person was born and they were a blank slate. They have been channeled down that path to an extent, or have been unable to resist being channeled down that path. We may have people who have a resentful mindset, who choose to act in a resentful way, or don't have the ability to not be compelled to act resentfully because they've got a basket of unresolved issues which their emotional regulation system isn't good enough to turn into something more positive. In other words, they are not very good at counting their blessings. They tend to spend their time counting their regrets. It's a mindset thing. Other types of mindset that I think I use because it helps me to work out how I am going to deal with the individuals in front of me. And bear in mind, I'm often sitting in the middle of the table with everybody around, or I've got different sides that I'm dealing with, and I'm trying to get a formula in my head for what sort of dynamic in this environment is going to work best for dealing with the problems, recognising the issues and getting them resolved. So I see people who have a solution mindset. Doesn't matter what's going on, they want to create solutions. They get off on creating solutions. Solutionists, pretty much defined by the fact whatever's going on, they want to try and solve it. They want to try and fix it. And that sometimes means you go finding problems where there aren't any just to feel as though you're useful. Fair enough. There are people with abundance mindsets. These are people who think there's more than enough to go around. Everybody should be happy. We just need to get our act into gear and recognise that it's all there to be done. Let's just get on with it. We don't need to be selfish. We don't need to hog stuff. We should be happy about sharing our toys because there's plenty to go around, and what goes around comes around. And that contrasts with the scarcity mindset, which is there's never going to be enough. I'm never going to be adequately prepared. I need to have massive savings for my retirement. Maybe I'll live to 180. Who knows what technology is going to do? It's that sort of thing. People who don't take risks because they don't think there is enough in it or there are enough resources to support the activity that's suggested. Then something I invented for my own use is the concept of the augmenter versus the diminisher. The augmenter is the person, particularly in a team environment, who simply takes every opportunity to make things better for everybody. Not necessarily for themselves, although they tend to get the benefit, but essentially these are the people who encourage, these are the people who see the good in things and build on whatever has been achieved, however modest or fantastic it may be, to make it even better, because everything can always be better. The extreme growth mindset type of individual. And you contrast them with the diminishers, who are people who will always suck the joy, a bit like Harry Potter's Dementors, out of people and situations. And I think that it's largely because if they press people down, they think as though you're in deep water, you're going to be pushing yourself up to keep your head above water. So you get the sense that a diminisher has probably doing the diminishing because they have their own problems of insecurity, resentment and so forth. So we're on a path now of unpacking why are they a diminisher, what does it point to, because if we can work out what it points to, we might then be able to deal with it. That's the idea. Now again, moving into some of the more traditional family business scenarios, we can have the entrepreneur, the person who doesn't have a rear vision mirror, just drives forward, sometimes leaves a path of destruction behind them because nothing's going to hold them back. And then, depending on how good the people are they surround themselves with, they succeed or fail over the little stuff. But they are the entrepreneurs, the monofocus. It's all about getting the job done and fundamentally winning whatever they're trying to win. Then we have the steward versus the owner. The steward is the person who is reasonably self-effacing and is community-minded. They want to look after whatever they've got and improve it for the benefit of their family, their friends, their workplace, their community, their colleagues, whoever you want to call them. They don't look as though they have a proprietary ownership of anything. They are simply there to make things work well for everybody and pass on a better world when they leave it or leave the business. And contrast that with the owner, which is one of the most difficult mindsets to deal with in a family business environment during a succession process, because the owner is the person who ultimately turns around and says, I made it, it's mine, and really I don't care what promises I've made over the years to anybody else. I can't remember what they were, but even though 40 years ago I promised my son, my daughter, my wife, one day this will all be yours, now I'm at the point where I'm thinking, well, why? I really put most of the effort in, I created this, it's my baby, I don't have to give it on to anybody, no matter what I promised. That is a real cause of conflict, broken promises. And then the final one under this category would be the collaborator versus the competitor. You've got people who work with teams and they're prepared to share responsibility around, as opposed to the competitor who has to be the first out of the trench, who has to take the spear in the chest to prove they're a hero, who has to win. So it's them against the world, as opposed to it's all of us in it together. I hope you can see how these very different mindsets give you tags and clues into the personalities and more importantly, the current behaviours of the people you're having to deal with, because you've got to work that out pretty quickly and pretty accurately when you walk into a conflict situation or you're in a conflict situation, if you're going to deal with it. You need to understand what's lurking below the surface, what's caused people to be acting the way they are, what's caused them to be thinking and feeling the way they are, as opposed to just reacting to it and then perhaps getting things horribly wrong. Okay, having now talked a bit about the different types of mindsets that we can come across, we need to work out why these things cause conflict, and then we need to move on finally to the whole point of this video, which is what do you do about it? I hope it's clear from what I've been saying that if you've got people who have chosen or been compelled to be in to have a particular mindset at a particular point in time, and that is creating conflict within the family business group, either in the family or the business or both, if we create labels in our minds and then use that to send us on a path of discovery, so it's nothing more than a prompt to explore why have you got that mindset? What has brought you to that place? And obviously character and personality will have a lot to do with it, but it may be something a lot more transient if it's a mindset that is effectively overriding character and personality. And what we do know is that although it may be very difficult to change character and personality, because they really don't change much unless somebody has a life-altering experience, we do know that we can change mindsets if we accurately identify what we've got and then massage it somewhere else, somewhere more positive. We can change mindset, and if we change mindset, going back to the original Dweck definition, we will change behaviours. And I've frequently in this conversation about you can't change people. No, you can't. But I don't need to change the people. I just need to change the way they are behaving towards each other to resolve a current conflict and to work out how to stay out of conflict in the future. And then we can take that from a more positive mindset and use it to influence behaviours irrespective, almost, of underlying character and personality. That's what we're trying to do here. So if we want in a family business environment to avoid conflict further down the track, the first thing you need to do, and for everybody listening to the video it's almost certainly too late, is during the early development years when kids are between up to 5 to 7 years old, we really need to be present in their lives to build social skills, life skills within a family culture that has emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, a decent set of values behind it, collaboration rather than knock down, drag out competition behind it, and so forth. If we can model that, if we can teach that, if we can inculcate that sort of thing in our children, they have got a much better chance of having the positive mindsets we've listed above rather than the negative mindsets when they grow up, and even more when they find themselves thrown together with other family members and non-family members in a family business. So we're looking at building emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, collaboration, a good respectful appreciation of how to build trust with other people. We're developing these life skills young and then developing them. And particularly if we have any intention of bringing kids into the business further down the track, we really want to train them from a very, very early age, like primitive tribes, if you like. We want to train them from a really early age to be effective adults. And at the young age, they soak up knowledge and learning like a sponge, and it forms character, personality, and informs the sort of mindsets they're going to have through school, through sport, through education, through career, through family, through life, and so forth. So the essence of what we're talking about here is a conflict management technique. We're thinking that mindset is one of the things that we should be taking on board if we're trying to resolve conflict. We deconstruct the causes of the conflict, the motivations that have brought people into conflict. Not just the surface level issues, but the personal issues, the relationship issues, the emotional issues that have generated a conflict. And bear in mind that a family business conflict is often something that's erupted after living underground for a great many years. So if we do a deconstruction, take it apart piece by piece, spread the entrails over the table, and then poke around in the entrails of the conflict and the family dynamics to identify the trigger points of conflict. If we then take them individually and look at them, I hate to say the word bite-sized chunks in the same sentence as entrails, but you know what I mean. If we then look at each individual thing, each thing that we think has caused the conflict, we can take a current perspective on a past event and get a better, more accommodating understanding, and with any luck, we can say, okay, that's resolved, nail that in the closet, move on to the next one. And that is no longer a trigger for conflict, because we've used a current perception and a current mindset which is focused on getting the conflict resolved to address something that is identified as a previous cause of conflict, and we've now eliminated it. We've surgically removed it from the family dynamic mix. The point is we are taking a negative mindset and we are consciously attempting to put it into a more positive mindset. And fundamentally, that's what we do in a mediation environment, where we take people from conflict head to solution and agreement head. We're moving from negativity, demonizing the other side, to positivity, looking to the future. What do we need? What do we want to need out of this, and how do we get there? I hope you found this little analysis useful, and I hope you can apply it if you're in a family in conflict. If you can, that's great, and if you can't, give us a call and we'll try and help. If you like this video and found it useful, please give us a like, please subscribe, and if you know other people who may get use out of some of these insights that we're trying to share, please pass it on. I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist. Thanks for watching.